worldwide crash in shares and property bigger than the global financial crisis.
Every boom has to have a bust to follow.
Over the last 20 or 30 years, the Australian property market has been elevated to religion status. The prosperity promised by investing in real estate in Australia has had many effects, such as the rise of the horde of the property spruikers and the property bubble that has been apparently about to pop for more than 15 years. As a country, we have structured our system to reward people who invest in real estate, and over that time, Australia has prospered and the investors have been richly rewarded. Fast forward to present day and we're going through the steepest and fastest interest rates rise of all time, and it leaves us begging the question, is the party over? Did we get caught asleep at the wheel? In this video, we're going to take a look at the current state of play and ask, are we seeing the bursting of an Australian property market bubble in 2022 and 2023? Over the last 15 years, the warning lights have been flashing red on our overall indebtedness. The ratio of property values to household income has been constantly climbing, as the doomsayers love showing us as proof of the 2022 Australian bubble that's about to pop. All of this has been brought about by 25 odd years of reducing interest rates and the fact that Australia's average income is actually very high compared to the rest of the world. You can thank the world's demand for resources for that. But can it continue? We now have a different global situation than what we had before. The demand from China has stalled and the relationship was made worse when our leaders called for a transparent review as to what went on in Wuhan. China is important because in 2020 they took a massive 40.7% of all of our exports. The argument that this is just a large bump in the road is that China still need to finish their Belt and Road Initiative, which has still got another 30 odd years till completion, meaning they still need heaps of our resources. The question is, can China buy enough from us to cushion this property market slump? The answer to that would be a no, given that China's economy is on rocky territory as well. However, I wouldn't rule out Chinese demand to play a major factor in future booms in the property market. Actually, China is a good segue into the rising cost of living, which can also be translated to rising interest rates because supply lines have stalled and it's naturally pushed up the prices of everything. Even when things have cost the same to buy overseas, the cost to import them back has increased due to increased gas and oil prices to transport them, combined with added insurance costs due to global instability. The fact is the cost of stuff has gone up. This is not just a problem here, but all over the world. And the answer of central banks all around the world is to increase interest rates. The idea behind that is to reduce demand for goods and services in order to bring the cost of stuff down. A bold move considering these solutions will not solve the supply issues I've just mentioned. Anyway, that's what's happening, and the resulting rising interest rates is going to be a central factor in this property price bubble. The value of the property market is directly related to the supply and demand of money. Rising interest rates means the supply of money will reduce and therefore property prices will go down, but the question is by how much? Before I speculate about the real estate price drops, I'm going to address some of the supporting factors for the property market. Immigration clearly plays a role for demand for property. However, I think the effects of immigration is not going to kick in for a while until our doors fully open. Once that happens, we will see rents increase, and if interest rates ease, then the property market will grow again. But that's for the next cycle. Immigration won't affect property in the short term. If you want to understand more about the effects of immigration and other factors on the next property boom, I've made other videos that are worth watching. At the moment, there's still fairly low supply, at least down here in Melbourne and the rest of Victoria. I think that what we're seeing is property owners holding onto their properties because they believe the property market will boom again in the future. What we don't know is how high will home loan interest rates go. There is a point at which people cannot maintain their debt repayments and are forced to sell. If this creates an oversupply, then property prices will eventually drop more. This is what underpins the fears of the cult of the 40% drop and the property market bubble popping. Which brings me on to the next cushioning factor, which I think is the most important. This is kind of anti-intuitive because it's the same thing that's making things hard for us right now, and that is the Reserve Bank of Australia and the federal government. Once the property market drops by a certain amount, you'll have either or both the RBA and the federal government take action to support the property market and the broader economy. There is the argument to say that the RBA will have trouble getting inflation down, as it has all been caused by outside factors like China, the war, energy, and the pandemic. I get that. There will be a point, however, where the central bank must change policy because in their eyes, the results of keeping interest rates high will be worse than dropping them again. It's useful to look at history and understand that the role of government is to support the economy when times get nasty. A couple of weeks ago, the UK central bank was a classic example of this one. This is a classic boom-bust cycle, guys. So what would be pertinent to do is look at previous property market declines. The question is, how much will the property market go down before it goes up? This data is the main thing I'll refer back to here because it tells us quite a lot about the past. And Mark Twain once said something like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Take a look at the peak to trough prices on this graph. It's pretty crazy, hey? The first things that stood out to me was how small these dips actually are. I went back to the GFC because that was around the time when I bought my own first home, and it was very surprising that the dip spread across the 5 major cities was only 8.7% in 2008 and 6.2% in 2012. I must admit I was skeptical when I first saw this because it didn't feel right. It felt like the value of my property ping-ponged around for a few years, skyrocketing up 25% before dipping and then going back down and then going back up again before eventually dipping into the start of the cycle around 2012, 2013. So I did some basic Googling, and when you check the graph of that period, you actually see that it was a great time for property. It's interesting to me that the data smooths out some of the volatility that you get in individual markets. And the lesson here, I guess, is that sometimes it pays to zoom out as you can see the forest for the trees. Anyhow, that graph shows us that this is our steepest decline so far. The worrying thing here is that we're currently going through the fastest interest rate increases in Australian history. In my mind, there's no doubt that the effect of interest rate rises have not yet been seen on the property market. When you understand money creation, you understand that it all gets created as debt. Most of the debt we've created, apart from the stimulus, is through lending to home loans. Common sense would tell me that if we keep raising rates, then less money enters the economy because people cannot borrow as much as interest rates are on the increase. The reduced flow of liquidity to the markets will eventually show up in the stock market, and then we will reach peak panic. At this stage, I would expect the central bank to step in and change its policy around interest rates. Also, at this time, we're likely to see the government come out with more stimulus. We're living through one of those times in history that's going to be remembered well into the future. When I zoom out, I realize that as a nation, we're becoming very welfare dependent. To give you an example, we now see cash handouts and mortgage repayment pauses every time there's an emergency, which is actually fairly often. It's happening right now with the Victorian floods. The Victorian government don't have this money. It's basically created as debt, and the next generations will have to worry about paying it back. This is what our federal government's going to do if things escalate too much. They'll backstop the market before things get too bad. What does too bad look like? I don't know, but I get the feeling we're about to find out. If you want to find out more about the property market downturn, you might want to watch this video where I discuss the predictions that the property market's going to drop 40%. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can keep creating this content. Cheers.